The bundle smelled like lavender and old cloth. That was the first thing Warden Oran noticed when his scan lit up, not the biological signature, not the heat reading, not the faint golden pulse that made his equipment stutter and recalibrate 3 times in a row. It was the smell. It came through the ventilation of the small sleeping alcove like something from another world, entirely soft and dry and warm, and completely out of place on a scrap hauler station that mostly smelled of engine oil and recycled air. Halcyon Station was not a beautiful place. It sat in orbit above a dim yellow star that nobody had ever bothered to name properly, a mid-tier trading post where human cargo crews and alien dock workers passed each other in the corridors without much conversation. Humans had been tolerated here for 60 years, not loved, not celebrated, tolerated. They were small, they were loud, and they had a habit of doing things that made no sense to anyone else. Oran was Gretian, four-armed, slate blue, built like a door with opinions. He had been a Confederation warden for 31 years and had inspected a great many stations. He was good at his job because he did not find humans particularly interesting, which meant he processed their paperwork quickly and moved on. He had not expected today to be different. The inspection was routine. New treaty protocols required all stations to register non-certified biological entities. It was paperwork, or unlike paperwork, it had rules. The scan hit the anomaly at 14:07 station time. He almost dismissed it. The reading was faint, barely a whisper on the scanner, tucked behind a heat signature no bigger than a house cat. But the frequency, that specific ancient frequency, made Oran's 4 hands go very still. Orenthi. He ran the scan again and again. The result did not change. He found the alcove at the end of Corridor 7, residential block, see a small curtained space, the kind assigned to unregistered dependents and transit passengers. The curtain had little moons on it. Someone had drawn stars around the moons in what looked like pen. He pulled the curtain back. The girl was sitting cross-legged on her sleep mat, eating her evening meal. She looked up at him without alarm, which was itself unusual. Most humans startled when a 4-armed Gretian official pulled back their curtain unannounced. She was small even for a human child. 9 years, her file would later say, dark eyes, brown skin, hair pulled back in a way that suggested someone had taught her to do it neatly a long time ago, and she had kept doing it out of habit. Her meal was standard station ration, protein block, algae mash, flavored water pouch. She had eaten exactly half of everything. The other half sat wrapped in a piece of old cloth on the mat beside her. The cloth had embroidered flowers on it, faded ones, lavender and something else that had lost its color to time. Inside the cloth, curled so tightly it looked like a small golden knot, was the thing Oran's scanner had found. It was no larger than his lower left hand. Its scales were ivory white at the edges and deep gold at the center, and it shimmered faintly even in the dim light of the alcove, the way things shimmer when they are very old or very new or both at once. Its eyes were closed. It was asleep. Oran's scanner made a sound it had never made before. He stood very still. Behind him, his 2 junior officers had gone silent. The girl looked at the creature, then at Oran, then back at her meal. She picked up the water pouch and took a careful sip. That, Oran said, when he found his voice, is an Orenthi hatchling. I know, the girl said. That is the most legally protected species in the Confederation. I know that too. Oran looked at his scanner. He looked at the sleeping creature. He looked at the wrapped half-meal sitting beside it with the patience of something that had always been there. He said carefully, how long has it been here? 6 months, I think. She hatched about 3 months ago. And before that, the egg was in the debris field. I thought it was broken. I wrapped it up because it seemed cold. One of the junior officers whispered something into their comm. Oran held up a hand to stop them. He kept his eyes on the girl. Why, he asked slowly, is there a half portion of food sitting next to a sacred hatchling in an embroidered cloth at 14:00 on a Tuesday? The girl looked at the bundle. She looked at the sleeping dragon. Then she looked at Oran with the particular patience of someone who had explained something many times before and found it never quite landed the way she meant it to. The food isn't for her, she said. Solar just likes sleeping there because it's warm. Then who is the food for? The girl picked up her protein block again. She took a small, careful bite. My gran, she said. Oran waited for more. Nothing came. The dragon breathed slowly in the cloth. The lavender smell moved through the recycled air like something that had no business being on a scrap station and did not particularly care. Where is your grandmother? He asked. The girl chewed, swallowed, met his eyes with something that was not sadness exactly, it was steadier than sadness. She died, she said. 7 years ago, I still save her half. The station hummed around them. Oran's scanner beeped softly. He looked down at it. In 31 years of Confederation work, he had filled out many forms. He did not know which form to reach for now. He called for a station lockdown at 1409. He did not know yet what he had found. He only knew that it was not nothing. Nobody on Halcyon Station slept well that night. Not Oran, who sat in the temporary office he had requisitioned from a very confused docking administrator and stared at his scanner readings for 4 hours trying to find an error. Not Navigator Pell, who had been pulled out of his bunk at midnight, told that his ward was involved in a Confederation incident and was now sitting in a plastic chair outside the interview room with his hat in his hands, turning it over and over. Not researcher Tivy, who had arrived on the station 2 hours after the lockdown was called on emergency assignment and had pressed her 6 limbs flat against the corridor wall when they finally let her see solar, because she had studied Orenthi biology for 11 years and had never once believed she would stand in the same room as a living one. Dara slept fine, she always did. The interview room was small and smelled like industrial cleaner. Oran sat across from Dara with a data tablet and the expression of someone trying very hard to be professional about something that kept slipping out of his professional framework. I want to understand the sequence of events, he said. Dara nodded. She had her hands in her lap. Solar was not with her. They had asked to observe the hatchlings separately with Tivy, and Dara had agreed as long as Solar was kept warm. She had given them the cloth bundle without being asked. She had told them the bundle had to stay with the dragon or the dragon would not settle. She had been correct about that. 6 months ago, Oran said, reading from his tablet, you and Navigator Pell conducted a routine debris salvage in Sector 7. You recovered the egg. Yes. Pell's manifest does not list the egg. I didn't tell him I had it. Oran looked up. Why not? Dara thought about it, because he would have said we couldn't keep it, and I didn't know what it was yet. I just knew it was cold, and it had been alone in the debris for a long time. How did you know it had been there a long time? It had algae on it. Algae takes a while to grow. Oran noted this. A 9-year-old human had correctly deduced from algae growth patterns that the egg was not recently lost. His junior officers had not thought to check that. You brought it aboard. You placed it in the cloth. In Gran's bundle, yes. It's the warmest thing I have. Why is it the warmest thing you have? It's old and thick. Gran made it from pieces of things, a scarf, part of a blanket, a shirt of mine that got too small. She sewed it together so I'd have something soft. Oran looked at his tablet. He looked at Dara. He said, and the food. You began placing food in the bundle. I always place food in the bundle. That's not new. I started doing that when Gran died. Before the egg. Long before, 7 years before. He set the tablet down. He had been in law enforcement for a long time. He knew when someone was telling the truth. This child had never once shifted in her seat. Explain the food to me, he said, please. Dara looked at her hands, not because she was uncomfortable. She looked at them the way people look at something when they are trying to find the right words, not hide from the wrong ones. When someone dies, she said, there is a portion of things that was meant for them, not just food, a portion of your day, the things you wanted to tell them, the things you saved up to show them. Gran used to say that grief is just love that has nowhere to land. She paused. I give it somewhere to land. Every day I eat half my meal, and I wrap the other half, and I talk to Gran while I do it. I tell her about the day. I tell her what happened. I keep a place for her. Oran was quiet. It does not bring her back, Dara said, in case he was about to point this out. I know that, but she would not want to miss things, so I report in. Oran had 4 hands. He placed 2 of them flat on the table. The other 2 he folded in his lap, which was something he only did when he was working very hard at staying composed. And the hatchling, he said, she sleeps in the bundle. She found it herself, 3 days after she hatched. She just climbed in. I think it smells like something she recognizes. I don't know what. At that moment, through the thin wall, they both heard a sound. Low, humming, rhythmic, like a very small engine running smoothly. Tivy, in the next room, had apparently gotten Solar to settle by placing the bundle on the examination table. Dara's mouth did a small, quiet thing, not quite a smile, something older than a smile. Oran picked up his tablet. He needed to write a report. The report required him to recommend either relocation of the hatchling to a Confederation facility or documentation of an unusual bonding circumstance. He had written the first kind of report many times. He had never written the second. Pell was brought in after Dara. He was a tired man, the kind of tired that had become the default. He told Oran that Dara had been in his care for 5 years, that she was quiet, capable, never caused trouble, that he had never asked about the food ritual because it seemed personal and he had not wanted to push, that he had assumed, when he thought about it at all, that it was something humans did, something grief did. When Pell left, Oran sat alone for a while. He pulled up the file on Dara's grandmother, Ida, xenobiologist, 40 years on small ships and outer stations, deceased, cardiac event, 7 years ago. She had published 3 papers on alien bonding behaviors in her lifetime. He read the titles of those papers twice. Then he went next door, where Tivy was sitting very still with a scanner she had forgotten to turn on, watching a golden hatchling sleep in a bundle of old cloth, and he said, "We are going to need more time." Tivy said, without looking up, "Yes, we are going to need considerably more time." The egg shard was the size of a palm, and lighter than it looked. Tivy had asked Dara about it on the second morning, carefully, the way she asked all her questions, with a kind of precise politeness that Dara seemed to understand and respect. The shard had come with the egg. Dara kept it in the bundle too. She had not known why, she said. It seemed wrong to throw away a piece of something that had been whole. The shard was golden white, like Solar's scales, and it had a texture that was not quite like any shell Tivy had catalogued. Under her microscope, it looked less like material and more like structure, layered, deliberate, engineered at a level that was not random nature, but something that had been grown with intention over a very long time. On the 3rd day, Tivy brought out the harmonic resonance tool. It was a delicate piece of equipment, meant for reading biological memory structures in dormant specimens. She had used it on fossils, on shed skins, on preserved tissue samples. She had never used it on something still warm. But the shard was from an Orenthi egg, and the Orenthi were known, in the deep academic literature that very few people actually read, to embed something into their shells. A record, a witness, something that watched and stored and waited. She told Oran what she planned to do. He told her to be careful. She told him she was always careful. He gave her a look that said he was not entirely convinced. She set the tool against the shard. She ran the frequency. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the station's translation system, which Tivy had not connected to the tool, which should not have been receiving any signal at all, crackled to life. The voice that came through was not loud. It was the kind of voice that did not need to be loud, because it had learned long ago that things worth listening to do not need to shout. It was old, not in the way of old recordings or degraded audio. Old in the way of stone, old in the way of water that has been running so long it has worn the rock smooth. It said, "We do not choose power, we do not choose strength, we choose the one who already knows how to hold what cannot be held." Oran, who had been standing near the door, did not move. Tivi turned her scanner off and then on again. It made no difference. "What are you?" Oran asked the room. "A record," the voice said. "A witness. The shell does not die when the egg opens. It watches. It has been watching since the moment the small one found us in the cold." "The small one," Tivi said. "Dara." "Yes." Oran stepped forward. He was a methodical person, and methodical people do not like it when the things they are investigating begin to speak back. But he was also, underneath the methodology, a thorough person, and thorough people do not leave questions sitting unanswered. "Why her?" he said. "The child is human. She is 9 years old. She found the egg by accident in a debris field. By your own species' recorded history, the Orenthi have bonded with senior diplomats, with fleet commanders, with ancient lineage holders. Why a human child on a scrap station?" The voice did not answer immediately. When it spoke, it did not sound defensive. It sounded as though it was translating something that did not easily fit the words available. "When someone dies," it said, "what do you do with the portion of yourself that was meant for them?" Oran's 4 hands went still. "My species processes grief communally," he said after a moment. "We share it. It disperses." "And when you are alone?" He did not answer. "The small one was alone," the voice said. "She was 7 years old and she was alone, and the person she had built herself around was gone. She had no community to share it with, no ritual that her people could give her. She made one. Every day she set aside the portion that had been meant for her grandmother. Every day she spoke to her. She kept the fire from going out." A pause, like a breath, though the shard had no lungs. "We felt that fire through the shell before solar was fully formed. The warmth of it, the shape of it. It was not power, it was not strength, it was faithfulness. An entire species of beings we have observed across 4,000 years, and we have not seen that specific thing very often. The refusal to let love become nothing just because the person is gone." The room was quiet enough that they could hear the ventilation. Tivi had stopped pretending to take notes. She did not know she was doing anything unusual, Oran said. "No," the voice agreed. "The most important things rarely announce themselves." Oran turned away. He stood at the small window of the research bay and looked at the corridor beyond it. Station workers were moving past, human and alien both, going about the ordinary business of a day. He thought about the dispersal process his species used for grief, the way the loss was shared until it became manageable, bearable, small enough to set down. He had never asked what happened to the love that had been attached to it. He had always assumed it dispersed too. "The bond is permanent?" he asked without turning back. "Orenthi bonds are not broken by separation," the voice said. "They are made in something older than proximity. However," and here the voice did something that might have been a pause for consideration, "separation would be unkind to both of them." Oran left the room. He stood in the corridor for a while, watching people walk past him, and he tried to write the next section of his official report in his head. He got as far as "bonding circumstance determined to be" and stopped. He could not, in professional conscience, write the word irrational, not anymore. He went back to his temporary office and sat down and looked at his tablet for a long time without touching it. He was beginning to think that this mission was not going to be resolved with paperwork. Tivi asked on the 4th evening, after the formal interviews were done, and the junior officers had gone to file their secondary reports, and the station had settled into the quieter rhythm of its night cycle. She knocked on the frame of Dara's alcove. The curtain with the moons and the hand-drawn stars was pushed aside. Dara was sitting cross-legged on the mat. Solar half asleep in her lap, running one finger slowly along the ridge of the hatchling's spine. Solar made the low humming sound. The cloth bundle was open beside them. "May I sit?" Tivi asked. Dara looked at her for a moment. Tivi was Yullian, six-limbed, smaller than Oran, with a golden-green sheen to her plated skin and large compound eyes that reflected light in a way that some humans found unsettling. Dara did not seem to find it unsettling. She moved over on the mat. Tivi folded herself down carefully. I would like to know about your grandmother, she said. Not for the report. I have enough for the report, for myself. Dara looked at Solar for a moment, then she began. Gran's name was Ida. She had not been a soft person in the easy ways. She did not tell comforting lies or pretend that hard things were smaller than they were. When Dara was 5 and asked why her parents had died, Ida told her plainly, the hauler's navigation system failed in a debris field, and they did not have time to correct it, and they did not suffer. She said it without flinching, and then she held Dara for a long time without saying anything else, because she believed that truth and comfort were not enemies, that you could have both if you were willing to sit still for a while. She believed in feeding things, stray animals that found their way onto the stations, dockworkers who ate alone, the memory of people who were gone. She had started the ritual with Dara when a crew member named Dov died during a run in Sector 12, a quiet engineer who had brought Dara small rocks from different stations. When he died, Ida sat Dara down and said, "We are going to save Dov's portion for 7 days. At every meal we will talk about him so he does not leave all at once." Dara had asked, at the end of the 7 days, what they did with the portion now. Ida had said, "We give it to something alive that needs it." There was a half-starved docking cat on their level. They left it there. The cat ate everything in under a minute. After Gran died, Dara said, "I didn't have anyone to do it with, but I did it anyway, because she would have wanted me to keep going, and because she stopped." She looked at the bundle. "Because if I stopped setting a place for her, she would leave all at once, and I'm not ready for that." Tivi's scanner was on. She turned it off. "What do you talk to her about?" she asked. "Everything, what happened in the day, funny things, difficult things, things I don't understand yet and want to think about out loud." Dara scratched gently behind Solar's small ears, the hatchling pressed up into it. "I told her about finding the egg. I told her every day when it didn't hatch yet. I told her the night it finally did. She would have loved Solar very much. She spent her whole life studying other species. She said humans were too shy about that. That we kept to ourselves too much and missed the best parts of the universe." Tivi was quiet. Dara said she had a paper, almost finished, about bonding behaviors. She never published it. Pell has it somewhere in his files. He kept all her things. Tivi made a note of this, not for science, for herself. "Do you think she hears you?" she asked. She was not sure why she asked. It was not a scientific question. She asked it anyway. Dara thought about it seriously, in the way she thought about all questions, not quickly, not to fill silence, but because she was actually considering. "I think she is wherever people go," she said. "I don't know where that is." Gran didn't know either. She said nobody does, and anyone who says they do is either guessing or selling something. A small pause. "But I think if she's anywhere she knows. She was very good at knowing things. She would not miss Solar." Another pause. "I like telling her anyway, even if she already knows. It keeps the shape of her clear in my head. I don't want to forget what she sounded like." Tivi sat with that. After a while, without planning to, she told Dara about her own mentor, a senior researcher named Wall who had trained her for 8 years and died 18 months ago during a survey mission. She had processed it the Yullian way, proper channels, memorial broadcast, the prescribed number of days of reduced duty. She had done everything correctly. She was not sure she had done enough. "Do you still talk to him?" Dara asked. "No," Tivi said. "I did not know I was allowed to." Dara looked at her steadily. "You don't need permission to love someone who's dead." Tivi returned to her console that night and opened Orun's preliminary recommendation. It said, in the official language of the Confederation, that the hatchling should be relocated to a proper facility and the human child should receive a psychological evaluation. Tivi read it 3 times. Then she opened a new document and began to write. She was not a fast writer, but she was a thorough one, and once she had something worth saying, she did not stop until it was said properly. The counter-recommendation came to 3 pages. It used formal Confederation language for the first 2. The 3rd page, in the interest of precision, was different. The last line said, "There is a word humans use that we do not have a direct translation for. The closest rendering I have found is faithful, not as a religious term, but as a description of ongoing action, a faithful grief, a grief that shows up every day and does the same small thing and does not stop. I have not seen this in 11 years of xenobiological research. I recommend we do not interrupt it. I recommend further that we study it. I believe we have been missing something important. She filed it at 02:30 station time and went to sit with Solar until morning, because she could, and because the voice had said separation would be unkind, and she did not want the hatchling to wake up alone. In his office, Oran's screen pinged with the incoming report. He read it once, he read it again. He opened the file on Ida, her photograph, her papers, the one unfinished document Pell had preserved in station archives. The title of the unfinished paper was On the Practice of Sustained Grief in Human Communities and Its Possible Function as a Social Bonding Mechanism. He sat with that for a long time. Then he wrote a single line in his personal log, not his official one. It said, "I have been misunderstanding what I am looking at." The hearing was conducted via long-range Comet 0900 on the 7th day. The chamber they used was the station administrator's conference room, which had 6 chairs, a long table, and a screen that took up most of one wall. 3 senior adjudicators of the Confederation appeared on that screen, 1 Drellian, 1 Maothi, 1 human-adjacent species from the outer ring whose name did not translate directly. They had read all the reports. Their expressions said they were still processing. Oran presented first. He was precise. He gave the facts in the correct order: discovery of the hatchling, confirmation of species, evidence of bonding, the voice of the shell's testimony, Tivi's counter-recommendation, the legal framework for Orenthi bonding under the Third Confederation Accord. He did not editorialize. He had edited that impulse out of himself overnight with considerable effort. Tivi presented second. She was less precise, more thorough. She had added 12 pages to her counter-recommendation by morning and had to be quietly told by Oran that 12 pages was too many and she would need to summarize. She summarized. It still took 20 minutes. Then Dara was called to speak. She sat at the table in the chair that was too large for her, with her hands in her lap, and she answered the adjudicator's questions the way she answered all questions, without hurry, without performance, without the particular anxiety that official proceedings tended to produce in people who were used to official proceedings mattering to their futures. She did not seem frightened. She seemed tired, the way people get when they have been patient for a long time and are waiting to go home. The senior Drellian adjudicator, who had 90 years of Confederation law behind her and a face that had learned to stay carefully neutral, asked the first question. "Child, you have been performing this food ritual for 7 years. Do you understand that, from a biological and practical standpoint, the reserved food has no recipient, that you are allocating resources to a function that produces no measurable outcome?" Dara said, "Gran said that love isn't always functional. She said sometimes it's faithful. Those are different things." The Drellian adjudicator wrote something down. The Maothi adjudicator, a younger being, rounder, with pale eyes, leaned forward and asked, "Do you believe your grandmother can perceive your actions? Do you have a religious or philosophical framework that supports continuity of consciousness after death?" Dara thought carefully. "I don't know if she perceives it. I don't think anybody knows for certain." Gran said, "Anyone who tells you they know for certain is guessing or selling something." She paused. "But I think she would want to know about Solar, and I think, if she's anywhere, she probably does know. She was good at finding things out." The outering adjudicator said, quietly, "And if she cannot perceive it, if the ritual accomplishes nothing in the way of transmission?" Dara looked at them steadily. "It accomplishes something. It keeps the shape of her clear. When I do the ritual, I remember how she talked and what she thought about and what she would have said about today. If I stopped, I would start to forget. I am not ready to forget her yet." A silence settled on the room. It was the voice of the shell that broke it. The translation system came on without warning, the same way it had in the research bay. Solar, who had been resting in the cloth bundle on the table beside Dara, a concession Oran had allowed, noting in his log that the hatchling became significantly distressed without proximity to the child, lifted her head. Her golden scales caught the light from the screen. The voice said, "In 300 years without a living hatchling, we have watched species grieve. We have observed rituals, ceremonies, the formal dispersion of loss. We have recorded the processes by which pain is moved through communities until it becomes small enough to be set down. We have not in that time seen what this child does. She does not move the grief through. She does not set it down. She tends it. She keeps it lit. It is not a wound. It is a practice. It is the most precise act of love we have recorded in 300 years of watching." A pause. "We chose correctly." The Drellian adjudicator set her stylus down. She called a recess. It lasted 4 hours. When the screen came back on, her face was still neutral in shape, but something in it had changed in the way that things change when they have been subjected to 4 hours of honest reckoning. "Confederation law on Orenthi bonding is clear," she said. "The bond is sacred. It cannot be legally severed without the willing consent of the hatchling. As the hatchling in this case is pre-verbal and has demonstrated consistent, active preference for the company and bonding object of this child, we find no grounds for mandatory separation." She paused. "Further, and I would like it noted formally in the record, in 90 years of presiding over Confederation proceedings, I have never heard the voice of the shell speak unsolicited in a legal setting. I would like that noted. I believe it matters." It was noted. The bond was formally recognized. Dara was designated Solar's keeper under the Third Accord. Oran was assigned as their station liaison, which he had not requested and did not object to. After the screen went dark, the room stayed quiet for a while. Pell found Dara afterward, sitting in the corridor outside with Solar in her lap. He sat down beside her on the floor without saying anything, which was not something he had done since she was very small. After a long quiet moment he said, "I never asked you about the food thing. I should have asked. Years ago." Dara leaned against his arm. She did not tell him it was fine, because she was an honest person and it was not entirely fine. But she said, "Gran would have liked you to ask." He said, "Tell me about her. From the beginning, I want to know." The corridor hummed. Solar made her low sound. Dara started at the beginning, a small ship, a dim outer station, a woman who believed in feeding things and telling the truth, and she talked until the station's lights shifted for evening and Pell listened to every word. It was the first time in 7 years that someone had sat down and listened to all of it. It was, in its way, the second most important thing that happened that day. A month passed the way months do on outer stations, not in dramatic events, but in the slow accumulation of small, ordinary changes that you only notice when you look back. Tivi's temporary research posting became an extended one. She did not complain about this. Her supervisor, who had expected her back within 2 weeks, received a comm on day 16 that said, "I require more time. I am studying something I do not have a framework for yet, and I would rather take more time than reach the wrong conclusion." Her supervisor approved the extension, partly because Tivi was his best researcher, and partly because the tone of that comm was unlike anything she had ever sent him, and it made him curious. Oran's weekly reports began to arrive with language that his supervisors described, in the margin notes of their internal reviews, as uncharacteristically philosophical. He had always written tight, clean reports, short sentences, correct vocabulary, no ornamentation. Now they arrived with longer paragraphs, questions where there had previously only been conclusions. One of his senior colleagues sent him a private message asking if he was unwell. He replied that he was not unwell. He was, he said, in the process of correcting a long-standing error in his thinking. His colleague did not respond to this. Word spread the way significant things spread in places where people have long memories and small lives that touch each other often. Not loudly, not all at once, but steadily. Gretian cargo loader named Bren came to Dara one evening. He was twice her height and 4 times her width, and he stood at the entrance to her alcove with his secondary arms folded and his primary arms hanging at his sides, and he said, in a voice carefully stripped of anything that might look like feeling, that he had heard she was the one who knew about the food ritual. His hatch sibling had died 2 years ago. He did not know what to do with the part of his day that had been meant for them. Dara listened. Then she said, "It doesn't have to be food. It can be anything that was meant for them. The point is that you set it aside. You make a place, you talk." Bren said, "Talk to who? They cannot hear." Dara said, "You're not talking to the air. You're keeping yourself in the habit of knowing them, so they don't leave all at once." Bren stood there for another moment. Then he said, "And it helps." Dara thought honestly about this. It doesn't make it smaller, but it makes it something you carry instead of something that carries you. He came back 3 days later and told her he had tried it. He did not say much else. He did not need to. The way he stood was different. A young Yullian communications officer named Ren, barely out of her training cycle, asked Tivi rather than Dara because she found Tivi easier to approach. She had lost her mentor. She had done the Yullian processing ritual correctly and still could not sleep. Tivi told her, with a precision that was also kindness, what Dara had told her. You do not need permission to love someone who is dead. You can keep talking. You can keep a place. Ren looked at her with the large, complex eyes of her species and said, "Is that what the human does?" Tivi said yes. Ren said, "And it works." Tivi said, "I think it works because it is true. I think we have been letting grief end before love was ready to." Solar grew. Not quickly. Orenthi maturity was measured in decades, not months, but the ivory gold scales brightened, her humming deepened by half a register. She had begun, Tivi noted in her research log, to archive. The low sound she made was not just comfort, it was recording. She was laying down memory the way her species had always done. She was recording Dara, the ritual, the cloth bundle with its faded flowers. The shape of a love that had been faithfully maintained for 7 years before the egg was ever found. She was recording Gran Ida, who she had never met. Dara understood this when Tivi explained it and did not find it strange. She found it right. She said, "Gran would have wanted to be remembered by something that lasts." She paused. "How long do Orenthi live?" Tivi said. Estimates ranged between 400 and 600 years. Dara nodded slowly. Then she smiled, small and genuine, and said, "Good." On the last evening of that month, Dara took her meal to the observation bay. It was the largest windowed room on the station, a wide curved space that looked directly into open space, the pale star below, the debris field to the east, and beyond it the dark that went on for a very long time. She set up her ritual there, which she had never done in a public space before. She did not know why she chose that night. She did it anyway. She ate half her meal slowly. She wrapped the rest in the flower cloth. Solar settled into the bundle with the familiar certainty of a creature that had always known where home was. Dara spoke quietly. She told Gran about the month, about Bren, about Ren and Tivi, and the way they sat together some evenings without much to say. About Oran, who had started arriving at her alcove sometimes and just sitting near it with his reports, not asking anything, just there in the way that people are sometimes there when they are still learning how to be. She told Gran that Pell had asked to hear more stories about her, and that she had told him about the rocks Dove used to bring, and the docking cat, and the way Gran laughed when something surprised her. She said, "I think you'd be proud of Solar. I think you'd be proud of me. I think you probably already know, but I like telling you anyway." She looked out at the stars for a while. She did not know, could not know, whether the words went anywhere beyond the window, whether they drifted into that long dark or simply dissolved in the recycled air of the station. Gran had always said nobody knew, and anyone who said they did was guessing or selling something. But she had also said that grief is love with nowhere to land. And Dara had spent 7 years building a place for it to land, a cloth bundle with faded flowers, half a meal, a few words in the small hours, and what had settled there, slowly, in the warmth of that keeping, was not just loss. It was a dragon with golden scales who hummed old things to sleep. It was a cargo loader who was learning to carry what he had been dragging. It was a researcher who had stopped waiting for permission to grieve. It was a Confederation warden who was rewriting, word by careful word, what he understood about love. It was, in the end, a small and ordinary thing, the kind that changes nothing official and shifts everything quietly. Oran had been standing in the doorway again. He was not hiding. He had stopped doing that, stopped pretending he had somewhere else to be. He stood there with his 4 hands folded, and he watched a human child speak to the stars and a golden hatchling sleep in a flowercloth bundle. And he thought about the portions of himself that had been set aside over 31 years, the loss of his hatch partner, the colleagues he had outlasted, the places he had loved and left, and how he had processed all of them correctly according to Gretian protocol and dispersed them and let them go. He thought about how much of it he could not actually remember anymore. He opened his personal log, not the official one. He wrote, "Humans tend their grief like a fire. They do not let it go out. I have spent my life letting things go out. I thought that was how you moved forward. I am beginning to understand that you can carry a fire and still walk." He did not interrupt Dara. The station turned slowly in the space above the pale star, and inside it, in one curved room with wide windows, a girl kept her word to a woman who had been dead for 7 years, because some kinds of love do not require the other person to still be there. They only require you to keep showing up. She always did. She always would. In the cloth bundle, in the warmth of the saved and faithful half, Sola slept and hummed and remembered everything.